In Colombia, an advisor to Duque's government is accused of diverting $62 million. In Peru, several social movements filed an injunction in court to reverse a law that allows ultra-conservative associations to produce school textbooks. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe agreed to resign from his post amid the nation's political crisis. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Colombia, an advisor to Duque's government is accused of diverting $62 million worth of resources intended for the implementation of the peace accords. Emilio Arquila, former presidential advisor to the government of Duque, will have to testify before the Attorney General's office about the corruption case surrounding resources destined for projects of the peace agreement signed in 2016. Among those involved are, in addition to Arquila, several mayors, members of the Comptroller's Office, several congressmen from the Conservative Party, among other officials. Likewise, according to a bulletin from the Attorney General's office, tests are being carried out in order to verify the occurrence of allegedly irregular conduct by officials that would have affected the correct use of resources of the general royalty systems. Venezuelan authorities established in the city of Caracas the Congress of the New Era with the social movements and the anti-blockade movement nationally and internationally. During the event, the Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez pointed out that with the launching of the Congress begins an act of unity and love for the homeland as well as the entrepreneurs' heap of Venezuelans. Rodriguez recalled that the social movements are part of the economic recovery of the country and denounced that since 2015, at least 763 coercive and unilateral measures were issued against Venezuela. In this sense, the official called to continue studying the sanctions that affect the nation and do not allow the Bolivarian process to move forward, and likewise activate the anti-blockade movement at all levels.
With the setting up of this Congress, all the structures are renewed. A territorial and sectoral debate of all the movement is established, and the anti-blockade movement is activated throughout the country and the world. This Congress of the New Era is formally established to raise the most sublime values of humanity to the highest from our beloved Venezuela, for our future, for our past, and for our historical roots.
The Vice President Delcy Rodriguez also stated that the Central Bank of Venezuela continues to defend its right to recover the gold belonging to all Venezuelans, which was stolen by the United Kingdom.
In the next few days, the trial will be settled in a court in the United Kingdom. Venezuela is fighting for the gold of Venezuelans. You are going to allow the government of the United Kingdom, in a deep crisis, to steal the gold of all Venezuelans? That is why the Central Bank of Venezuela is there fighting. But we have to fight here in the streets for the gold that belongs to our people.
In Peru, several social movements filed an injunction in court to reverse a law that allows ultra-conservative associations to produce school textbooks. Specialists have qualified the law as unconstitutional and discriminatory action, since it refers specifically to public schools, while recalling that this type of material is currently carried out by trained and expert personnel in the educational area. They also warn about the elaboration of the regulations for the application of the aforementioned legal instrument by the country's educational authorities. In Panama, the education unions declared an indefinite strike on Friday as non-agreement was reached with the national government. The strike has been accompanied with different mobilizations all over the country, and a different sector has joined, including transportation. Demonstrators reject the high cost of living while demanding a decrease in the cost of fuel and a freeze in its price, as well as the payment of back wages for educators. The day's of protests have turned violent in the provinces of Chiriquí, Veraguas, Herrera, and Los Santos following the repressive actions of police authorities. In the United States, President Biden has just signed an executive order aimed at ensuring access to contraception, abortion medication, and other women's health services.
I'm signing this important executive order. I'm asking the Justice Department that, much like they did in the civil rights era, to do something, do everything in their power to protect these women seeking to invoke their rights. In states where clinics are still open, to protect them from intimidation, to protect the right of women to travel from state that prohibits seeking the medical attention that she needs to a state to provide that care.
The International Caribbean Festival began in Cuba after the pause imposed by COVID-19 in the last 2 years. Last Sunday, the 41st edition of the International Festival of the Caribbean began in Santiago de Cuba with the participation of representatives from 17 countries and groups of solidarity with Cuba from different latitudes. The event will extend until July 9th, where artists, academics, and experts will meet with a wide representation of Puerto Rico. The festival's program also includes the recognition of the 40th anniversary of Casa del Caribe and the 30th anniversary of Estudio Teatral Macuba as a living and reliable example of the traditional popular culture. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back from the South. The G20 foreign ministers meeting in Indonesia failed to agree on the conflict in Ukraine. The heads of diplomacy gathered on the island of Bali failed to agree on a statement on the Ukrainian conflict and how to face its global impacts after a day that showed the division among the attendees. The Bali meeting is the prelude to the summit of heads of state and government to be held in November on the Indonesian island, scheduled to discuss the world recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic, but whose agenda turned to the Ukrainian crisis. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Argentinian Foreign Minister Santiago Cafiero pledged to strengthen coordination and increase cooperation on building the Belt and Road between their countries. They made Thursday on the sidelines of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting held in Bali. During the meeting, Wang said the solid mutual trust and friendship established between the two heads of state have provided strategic guidance for developing bilateral relations. For his part, Cafiero said that Argentina admires China's development achievements and appreciates China for its support for Argentina in safeguarding the sovereignty over the Malvinas Islands. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries. Russian President Vladimir Putin warns of catastrophic consequences of Western sanctions on the global energy market during a televised government meeting.
The world market are still in shock due to the Western calls to drop Russian energy resources. The Europeans are trying to replace Russian energy resources. However, the result of such actions is quite predictable. The rise of gas spot price and the price increase for consumers and households. These demonstrates that sanctions against Russia damage more those countries that implement these sanctions than what they do damage us.
Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak and the chairman of the Central Bank of Iran, Ali Saleh Abadi, discussed bilateral financial, banking, and investment cooperation. The meeting discussed issues related to the development of cooperation between the countries, in particular increasing the use of national currencies in mutual payments. joint work on financial messaging systems, and also the financing of promising projects. The text also specified that investment plans will be aimed at transport infrastructure and the field of fossil fuels, including the petrochemical industry and processing. The Japanese government ruled out suspending upper house elections. The Secretary General of the Liberal Democratic Party, Toshimitsu Motegi, assured that the party will continue with the campaign events in order to show that the country will not give in to fear. In this regard, the Prime Minister of Japan and President of the party, Fumio Kishida, detailed that the elections are the pillar of democracy and stressed that democracy must be defended, so he hopes that the people of Japan will think about it. According to polls, the ruling coalition led by Kishida is positioned as a favorite, and the party is likely to expand the number of seats, which will give the premier more control over the formation. The funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated, was scheduled for July 12th. According to state officials, the former Prime Minister's body will be taken to his residence in Tokyo on Saturday. Abe was shot while delivering a speech in support of his Liberal Democratic Party's candidates near Yamato Saidaiji Station as part of Sunday's election polls. Over the past few years, Abe has promoted several proposals to enhance the Asian nation's defense capabilities, including reforming the 1946 pacifist constitution. Japanese were stunned Friday after the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe during a political rally.
He did good and bad things, but overall he was dedicated to Japan. He had contributed and could have contributed much more to the country. It will be a great loss for Japan. I can't believe the fact that the former Prime Minister was shot with a gun, and that he was a high-level Japanese politician, and that he died suddenly. It was absolutely shocking.
At least 16 people have died and dozens were injured after flash floods at Indian Kashmir pilgrimage sites. Emergency workers rescued thousands of pilgrims after flash floods triggered by sudden rain swept through their makeshift camps during an annual Hindu pilgrimage to an icy Himalayan cave in Indian-administered Kashmir, officials say Saturday. Authorities suspended the pilgrimage for 2 days as rain continued to last the region. Officials also reported about 15,000 devotees were moved to safer locations and at least 5,000 seniors were administered first aid at base camp hospitals set up for the pilgrimage, which is undertaken by hundreds of thousands of Hindus from across India. More news coming up after the final show breaks, so don't go away. Welcome back From the South. Thousands rally in Sri Lanka's commercial capital Colombo demanding President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign, blaming government mismanagement for an unprecedented economic crisis. Sri Lanka Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is willing to resign to make way for an all-party government. His office says in a statement which follows angry protesters storming the president's residence and office. President Rajapaksa was evacuated from the president's house in capital Colombo before thousands of protesters stormed his residence on Saturday, demanding his resignation in one of the largest anti-government marches in the crisis-hit island this year. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad visited the province of Aleppo for the first time since the outbreak of the conflict and the intervention of foreign mercenaries over 11 years ago. The head of state state, al-Assad was present at the inauguration of the Aleppo thermoelectric power plant, where he accompanied his workers in the commissioning of the fifth generation set that will supply electricity to the governorate. The president considered that the governorate of Aleppo has suffered the most as a result of terrorism and sabotage. Therefore, he indicated that its inhabitants have the right to be the main beneficiaries of the reconstruction of this power plant. In this context, President al-Assad expressed to the personnel his pride for their efforts, dedication, and honesty. The European Commission vowed to step up its work with Morocco to fight people smugglers following the death of 23 people at the Morocco-Spanish border 2 weeks ago. EU Commissioner for Home Affairs Ylva Johansson and Spanish Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska met with Morocco's Interior Minister Abdelaouf Laftit in Rabat to discuss the events of June 24th, when hundreds of sub-Saharan migrants and asylum seekers attempted to storm through a border post and scale a border fence into Melilla. The European Commission has said in response it would enhance police cooperation with Morocco, including with joint investigations. Both Grande Marlaska and Johansson praised Morocco for its work, which, according to the European Commission, has prevented 26,000 irregular departures. Huge crowds of robed Muslim pilgrims prayed on Saudi Arabia's Mount Arafat, the climax of the biggest Hajj pilgrimage since the pandemic forced drastic cuts in number for 2 years. Groups of worshippers, many holding umbrellas against the sun, recited verses from the Quran on the rocky rise where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have given his final sermon. Prayers on Mount Arafat are the highlight of the annual pilgrimage, capped this year at 1 million people, including 850,000 from abroad. They will sleep under the stars in the nearby Musdalifa before performing the symbolic stoning of the devil's ceremony on Saturday. The Hajj, usually one of the world's largest annual religious gatherings, is among the 5 pillars of Islam and must be undertaken by all Muslims with the means at least once in their lives. Faced with soaring inflation and the prospect of a wheat shortage due to the Ukrainian conflict, Ivory Coast is turning to local foodstuffs to feed its population. As wheat prices are driven upwards, bakers are starting to use locally produced cassava flour to bake bread. Also, Ivorian authorities have pegged the price of a baguette at between 150 and 200 CFA francs, depending on weight, channeling subsidies worth 6.4 billion CFA francs, about 10 million to the country's 2,500 bakeries.
There is no shortage of cassava. Today, cassava can be used for flour and cassava flour for bread and other dishes. So we don't have to focus on wheat flour, which today has an exorbitant price. So we promote local products. In addition, our local products are gluten-free and have good energy values such as lipids, carbohydrates. So we encourage people to turn to local produce.
Following the death of former Angolan President José Eduardo dos Santos, the current Angolan Foreign Minister declared that the Angolan people will honor the memory of a man who should be considered son of Angola and Africa.
We continue to express both the solidarity and the responsibility of the Angolan government. He was a former president of the Republic. The presidential decree has already decreed a national mourning. It is a moment of serenity. And for us, we honor the memory of what he was, President of Angola and Son of Angola, and Son of Africa.
After the death of the former Angolan President José Eduardo dos Santos, the citizens of that country have expressed their opinion and condolences. The national government decreed 5 days of national mourning due to the event.
My feeling is deep related to that. It was painful when I heard about his death. I felt it a lot, knowing that he was someone who, if today we have peace, it's because of him. He was a mentor of peace. When I was born, I am 30-something now, he was already president. He did good things and also naturally made huge mistakes, but his death made me feel very sad.
TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, versions will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other faraway nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and all faithfulness to our audience. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.